The chamber is designed to remind you who holds power before a single word is spoken. The ceilings stretch high above, polished stone and dark wood reflecting decades of authority. Microphones sit heavy on the desks, angled toward faces that have grown accustomed to being obeyed. Nameplates gleam, papers are stacked neatly, as if order itself has been institutionalized. This is a room where people are interrupted more often than they are heard, where volume is mistaken for certainty, and where impatience is wielded like a tool. Zohran Mamdani sits at the witness table, back straight but relaxed, hands resting lightly in front of him. He does not fidget. He does not scan the room for allies or cameras. He looks at whoever is speaking, fully, as if the act of listening itself is intentional. To some in the room, that alone feels unsettling. A senior figure clears his throat and begins, his voice practiced, authoritative, layered with polite disdain. He speaks at length about fiscal responsibility, about realism, about how the world simply doesn't work that way. The question, when it finally arrives, is framed as concern but sharpened with implication, that Zohran's proposals are naive, that his ideas are untested, that enthusiasm is no substitute for experience. A few people smile knowingly. Someone chuckles under their breath. This is the script. They've run it countless times. Zohran waits until the official finishes completely. He doesn't jump in early. He doesn't react to the laughter. When he does speak, his voice is even, almost gentle. "Thank you for the question," he says. "I think it's an important one." The tone alone disrupts expectations. There is no defensiveness, no sarcasm. He doesn't rush to justify himself. Instead, he nods slightly, as if acknowledging the seriousness of the concern. "When we talk about what's realistic," he continues, "I think it's worth being specific about what we mean." He pauses, just long enough to ensure the room is listening rather than waiting to interrupt. "For decades," he says, "we've been told that certain things are impossible: affordable housing at scale, accessible healthcare, dignified wages. And yet, when we look closely, we find that these things exist. Just not for everyone." A pen stops tapping. Someone leans back in their chair. Zohran doesn't gesture wildly. His hands move minimally, reinforcing rather than performing. He cites figures calmly, referencing policies already implemented elsewhere, pilot programs that have worked, budgets that were once considered radical and are now standard. He doesn't present them as weapons, just facts placed carefully on the table. An official interrupts him mid-sentence. "But that's not comparable." Zohran stops immediately, not in irritation, but in courtesy. "I hear you," he says, with a small smile. "And I promise I'll address that directly." The interruption dissolves, oddly embarrassed by his response. He continues, picking up exactly where he left off, as if nothing happened. "As for cost," Zohran says, "we should also talk about the cost of maintaining the status quo. Because that cost doesn't disappear, it just gets paid by the same communities over and over again." He lets the sentence settle. No dramatic emphasis, just clarity. Another figure leans forward now, tone sharper. "So you're suggesting that everyone before you simply didn't understand these issues?" Zohran shakes his head gently. "No, I'm suggesting they understood them very well, and made choices accordingly." There is no accusation in his voice. That's what makes it land. He isn't calling anyone corrupt. He isn't raising his voice. He's simply stating that decisions reflect priorities. A murmur moves through the room. "What I'm asking," Zohran continues, "is that we be honest about whose priorities have been protected by our definition of realistic." The word protected hangs in the air. Someone tries a different angle, invoking unintended consequences, warning of instability, invoking the language of caution that has stalled change for generations. Zohran listens attentively, nodding along, not dismissive, not bored. "That concern is valid," he says when they finish. "Which is why we should also talk about the unintended consequences of inaction." He lays them out calmly: displacement, debt, burnout, loss of trust in institutions. He speaks of them not as abstract problems but as predictable outcomes of choices already made. Still no raised voice. Still no theatrics. The officials shift. One glances down at their notes, as if searching for a line they haven't already used. Another folds their arms, jaw tightening. Zohran notices but doesn't react. He asks a question instead. "Can someone explain to me," he says sincerely, "why we're comfortable calling these outcomes unfortunate, but not calling them avoidable?" Silence answers first. The room isn't hostile yet, but it's no longer relaxed. The smiles have faded. The easy confidence has thinned. Zohran hasn't attacked anyone personally, but the framework they rely on is being examined carefully, methodically, without drama. A senior voice finally responds, a bit louder now, reclaiming authority. You make it sound simple. Zohran nods. I think we often complicate things to avoid admitting what's actually difficult. And what's that? The official asks. Changing who benefits, Zohran replies. There it is. No accusation, no moral grandstanding, just a statement so plain it can't be deflected easily. The audience, staffers, journalists, observers, has gone quiet. Pens hover. Cameras adjust slightly, sensing something different is happening. Zohran continues, still composed. This isn't about ideology. It's about whether we're willing to measure success by outcomes instead of intentions. Another attempt to interrupt comes, weaker this time. Zohran pauses again, waits, then resumes without frustration. I'm not asking anyone to abandon caution, he says. I'm asking that we apply it evenly. He looks around the room, meeting eyes without challenge, without apology. For a long time, he adds, risk has been something only certain people were asked to live with. The phrase lands softly but decisively. By the time the chair calls the session to a close, nothing explosive has happened. No shouting, no dramatic confrontation, yet the energy in the room is unmistakably altered. The establishment hasn't been insulted or embarrassed in the traditional sense. It has been slowed down, forced to explain itself, stripped of the comfort that comes from never being questioned carefully. Zohran gathers his papers quietly. He thanks the panel for their time. As he stands, there is no victory in his posture, no defiance. Just calm. The second room is smaller, flatter, less theatrical, but no less revealing. Fluorescent lights hum softly overhead, casting an even glow that leaves nowhere to hide behind shadow or spectacle. The chairs are closer together, the cameras nearer, the questions sharper. This is where narratives get shaped, where moments are compressed into headlines and 10-second clips. Zohran Mamdani takes his seat again, adjusting the microphone with the same unhurried care as before, as if time itself isn't something he feels pressed by. The people across from him have changed. These are not the polished power brokers from the chamber but journalists, analysts, commentators, people who translate power into stories. They have watched what happened earlier. They are alert now, cautious in a way that betrays curiosity mixed with uncertainty. The first question comes quickly, almost reflexively. You were very calm in there, a reporter says. Some would argue that calmness isn't enough when you're confronting entrenched power. Why not be more forceful? Zohran listens fully, nodding once. He doesn't rush to answer. I don't think calmness and force are opposites, he says finally. I think force without clarity gets dismissed as emotion. Calmness makes people listen longer than they expect to. A few heads tilt. Pens begin moving. Another reporter jumps in, but doesn't that let the establishment off the hook? They're very comfortable with polite conversations. Zohran smiles slightly, not amused, but thoughtful. They're comfortable when politeness avoids specifics. They're less comfortable when politeness insists on them. There's a brief pause as that settles. Someone in the back shifts their weight. A commentator leans forward, voice edged with skepticism. What happened today? Some would say you embarrassed people without ever calling them out directly. Was that intentional? Zohran considers the word embarrassed. I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone, he says. I was trying to make the conversation honest. But honesty can be humiliating, the commentator presses. Only if we've been relying on dishonesty, Zohran replies evenly. The room quiets again. There's no sting in his voice, no relish in the line. It's delivered the same way he's delivered everything else, calmly, precisely. Another question follows, more pointed. Critics say your approach sounds good in theory, but politics is messy. Don't you worry that refusing to play the game puts you at a disadvantage? Zohran leans back slightly, hands still folded. I think the game depends on everyone agreeing it's the only one available. A few reporters exchange glances. For a long time, he continues, we've been told that politics has to be cynical to be effective. But cynicism is a strategy too, and it's one that's failed a lot of people. Someone scribbles faster now. So what's your strategy? A journalist asks. Consistency, Zohran says without hesitation. Saying the same thing whether the room is friendly or hostile. Answering the same questions even when they're asked in bad faith. Not letting urgency turn into recklessness. A reporter raises an eyebrow. Some activists would say anger is necessary. Zohran nods. Anger is necessary. It tells us something is wrong. But it shouldn't be the only thing guiding our decisions. He leans slightly toward the microphone. Anger opens the door. Clarity decides what we do once we're inside. The metaphor hangs there, clean and unforced. Another voice cuts in, sharper now. Do you think today changed anything? Or was it just a good performance? Zohran doesn't bristle. He doesn't smile either. If it was a performance, he says, it wouldn't hold up when the cameras are gone. So you expect results. I expect follow-up, he replies. I expect people to stop relying on reflexes and start explaining their choices. A pause. The energy in the room has shifted again, not confrontational, but intent. A younger reporter speaks next, quieter. You didn't raise your voice once. Was that hard? Zohran thinks for a moment. It's harder to stay calm than to get loud, he says.